We also hope that participants will consider ways to promote more equitable communities for all children and families. We remind everyone that you are on mute and will be unable to mute yourself. Please post questions in the chat box for the presenter's responses at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth YouTube page. Finally, please fill out the survey that pops up at the end of the webinar and let us know if you'd be willing and interested in joining a learning community addressing today's topic area. As a reminder, your certificate, link to the presentation, and copy of the slides will be emailed out within the next few business days. This webinar may go over by a few minutes for questions. If you need to leave at the hour and can't stay for questions, you'll still receive a certificate. If you are calling in, please email jen.croft@tn.gov and let her know that you will need a certificate. We thank the Tennessee chapter of the National Association of Social Workers for providing CEUs for this event. We thank Building Strong Brains Tennessee for sponsoring the event. If you are interested in receiving notice of future Building Strong Brains Lunch and Learn opportunities, please email Jennifer Drake Croft at jen.croft@tn.gov. Now I would like to introduce you to our wonderful panelists. First, we will have Julie Malone, and Julie is Director of Aspire, a program at Cora Cox Academy in Kingsport, Tennessee. Then we will have Adam Clark, who is Principal of North Coffee Elementary in Manchester, Tennessee. And last but not least, we will have Job Isles, who is the Trauma-Informed Specialist in Knox County Schools. So let's get started with Julie.
Julie, I think you're on mute.
Okay. Hey. When Janet asked me earlier if I would present this, I started thinking about what it was that I could share about being a trauma-informed school in Kingsport. And my staff and I just got together and we talked about the kids that we have and the relationships that we build and how important it is to have those relationships. I'm sorry, I'm looking at two screens. So just how important it is to build a strong foundation, to teach students resiliency and sometimes the rebellion that we get in trying to build those relationships. So I just wanted to delve in a little bit about some strategies that we use in the Aspire program and just kind of share what we've been doing. Okay, there's a quote here that I just find just very true in that just we don't want to underestimate the effect that we can have on kids and how we can turn their lives around. And that's honestly why we come to work every day here. And my team, they live this motto. So I wanted to share that out. I think it's very powerful. When I look at this picture, it just makes my heart happy because we did, as a district, a couple of years ago, we did this and had our students just say why they love school. And this young man is definitely a rebellious student and has been since probably about fourth grade. I've had his siblings, and this is what he chose to write. He didn't have any coercion at all in this, but this is what he wrote because his life outside of our walls is very tumultuous. And so this is something that I can always go back to and just know that we are home to many of our kids. And if you can't be a home and a safe place, then perhaps following trauma-informed practices can get you there. I think that, that's a foundation to get this, to get our kids where they need to be. Which you'll see in the background, your character equals your destiny. So things like that. Okay, so just wondering why kids are rebelling. I mean, if you have teenagers or you've been a teenager, you kind of know why kids rebel. But, oftentimes our kids start deciding they don't like school, they don't want to do the academic work, they don't want to follow through. They just want to be who they want to be. And a lot of that is because they don't have anybody who values them They don't have anybody who listens to them except for their friends. And, I don't know if many of you, wherever you are, if you have gangs in your area, but we have started seeing more gang activity in team sports. And I feel like that is because kids are accepted into these gangs. They have people who support them in these gangs. They create a family. And so we're trying at Flora Cox and the Aspire program to be the family that kids need rather than them having to go out and find a gang to join. We kind of want to be our own little gang. But that's just a hard climb, but we're trying. And then also just because of mental health, they don't know what else to do. They don't have support. They don't have somebody to talk to. They don't know what's around the corner, and they've had really traumatic experiences in life, and they don't know how to overcome those and work through those. So we have implemented restorative practices into our buildings, and I'm sure you all know a little bit about restorative practices. If you do not, I would encourage you highly to do some reading and research with restorative practices and see who around you or what schools around you, or even reading a book to try to understand. We've been to the IRP trainings with my staff, and I've also been to a couple from the Tennessee Department of Ed with restorative practices. So it's just a social science that tells kids how to repair relationships, and that's something that our kids don't come to us knowing because of the way that they live their lives outside of school. No one to model them how to repair relationships and what to do when things get hard. They just want to punch and yell and scream. And modeling these processes helps them. It helps me in my own parenting world to show my kids how their actions affect others and how to repair the relationships between siblings. So we start every day with a circle, and if for some reason we're late, my kids, they come in and they say, we're not having circle today. And these are the very same kids that complain that we're having circle today. But they crave that because that's where we build trust. That's where we listen to kids. We get to know our kids in circle. We teach, empathy in circle and compassion. And we cry together, we laugh together. That's just a really important, special time. And that's something that we really are missing right now. In the spring, when we all went virtual, we still have circles virtually. So with as many kids that could join, we needed to do that because that's a definite piece of our culture in our school. Consistency, to have relationships over rebellion. We have to display integrity. We have to, be trustworthy. We have to be here every day. We have to be consistent. We have to show our kids that we're committed to them, that we're committed to them reaching their goals, and we're going to support them. We have to be empathetic and regard where they're coming from and know that that's important to them. And we can't discount their stories because it's real and that's life to them. And then we have to let them know that that's the reputation that we have. We have built a culture of caring and credibility, and that's our reputation, and that's what we want our community to see us as. When I first started in administration, my supervisor always said this to me, and it's just always stuck, that they have to know how much I care before they're going to trust me. So that is first and foremost with everything, and the kids who are most rebellious in our district, they have to know that we care. So these are the trainings that my staff and we have spent the last 3 or 4 years. We've had ACES training. We've been to a Boys Town training because primarily in our building we have a ratio of about 80% boys. Their majority are male. We've done the trauma-informed training, so we're a trauma-informed school through the Tennessee Department of Ed. I have been to the Attachment and Trauma Conference with a couple of my teachers for the last 2 years, and that's a fantastic conference if you ever have the opportunity to go. I think it's in Atlanta this upcoming year. We've done book studies on all the books that are listed there, just to see perspective, to open our eyes to what our kids are going through, just to continue to try to get more tools in our toolbox. Many of these have been open to our district, and so I hope to one day have some book studies done on campus with some of these so that we can continue to have those from year to year with incoming staff. These are just some pictures to show they're not always like this. They're not always happy. We are an alternative school, so we do get some of the most challenging students in our district. But even the most challenging students look like this when they're loved and they're cared for. They've reached their goals. You know, these are kids that if you had asked their third grade teacher years ago if they thought they would ever graduate from high school based on their attendance or their transiency rate or their home life, many of them, I would say, their teachers would probably have said, in all honesty, I don't think they'll make it. But they have, and we are super proud, and we celebrate their milestones every day. They come back and they want to share with our current students, you know, hey, you can do it. I did it. If I can do it, you can do it. And, you know, they are so proud that they have earned a high school diploma and they've made it. So we've showed them that we can support them so that they can reach their goals. This is how we get there. You know, we have to tear down the walls brick by brick, and they have some really big walls built around them. And to do that, we show them honesty, compassion, we listen to them, we're consistent. It's the same thing that I've talked about already, but one huge hurdle is getting parental and guardian support. Whoever their guardian is, it could just be somebody that they trust. You know, we have to get their support. We have to talk with them. And oftentimes in a traditional school, those are the people that are left out. Oh, well, you know, I email them. Well, I'm sorry, but my parents don't check email. My parents don't have minutes on their phone. You know, I have to send them text messages. So I set up a Google Voice account and I reach out to them via text. And my teachers reach out to them via text. You know, we go to their house. Even if it's in an unsafe neighborhood, we still go to their house. Because if I'm not willing to go there, why should they be willing to come into my world and trust me? We get some stares, and oftentimes other things happen. But I also tell the police officer where I'm going every time. But we have to give them time, and we have to be genuine in our efforts. Once we tear down the wall, we have to rebuild the wall with a stronger foundation. And these are going back to empathy, honesty, compassion, love, trust, reliability, commitment. All of those things are bit by bit, those pieces, to build back a stronger foundation for them. A couple of little stories just to show how relationships have overcome rebellion. Kid A, he has been in alternative school since 8th grade, off and on, because he can't make it in a traditional setting with anger and some issues that he's had. So he reached out to his teacher via Google Voice one evening, had gotten thrown out of the house, horrible, you know, wanted to hit people, was just going to just leave. Well, she talked him down and said, hey, I'll meet you with our mental health counselor that we have on staff. They met him at the school. He was able to punch the punching bag as much as he wanted to, because, yes, we have a punching bag in our school. He got all of that angst out. We were able to call Mom and talk with her and get both sides of the story, trying to de-escalate the situation. He went home that night and was able to have a conversation with Mom and work it out. Whereas if he didn't have the trust that he has with us and the teacher and the mental health counselor, I don't know where he would be right now, but he graduated June 18th. So, you know, that's a win for us. Kay ran away from her house. She was set that she's never going to come back. We had some of her friends talk to her. She talked to me. She talked to her teacher on the phone. We were able to talk her into coming back here. We were able to talk to her mom, getting her to come back here. And we all just came back and had a circle and a restorative conference to try to figure out what had happened and what set her off for her to leave the house. And to just display her rebellion, she ran away again. And she's on the run right now. But we're hoping that she will, you know, we talked to her. She still reaches out and talks to us, but we haven't been able to do this again. So this is just a recurring thing, but we're trying. Lastly, you know, we had a student, he's been in and out of alternative school since 6th grade. And last year he had an altercation with the SRO in our high school. But since he's come back to alternative school, he has done his work. He's making up for a year being out of school, not going to school. He's on track to graduate in a year and a half. And he even helped break up a fight. So I think that's a win. It's just, I could go on and on with stories of how our most rebellious kids, they seek relationships first, and when that doesn't work out, then they find rebellion. So if you can implement some of the trauma-informed strategies into your classroom or to your office or to your community, we're going to win over a nation of kids if we can continue to do this, and it will be better. So that's all that I have. Our next speaker is going to talk about circles at North Coffee, and that is Adam Clark.
All right. Serena, you getting me going there?
Yes, sir. Are you able to, do you see the circles?
I don't see them yet.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and start talking while you're working with that. So I want to, I guess.
Mr. Clark, sorry.
Yeah,
I see it, so.
Oh.
That's all right. Let's try it.
Serena, if you go to the top and click down where it says phase 1, and then do the copy circles.
Hey, Mr. Clark, did you perhaps, are you able to?
There we go. I was able to do that. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. All right, so just kind of picking up where Julie left off there, she ended her discussion talking about relationships. And so I know when Janet approached me about presenting on this Lunch and Learn series, she wanted to know, what are some things we're doing at North Coffee that are around the trauma-informed work. And I immediately went to circles. So I know that, one of the big aspects of trauma-informed practices is that one-on-one relationship with kids. And so that's what, if you don't take anything else away from this, we are focused at North Coffee on building relationships with kids. And so one of the big ways we do that is through circles, and we believe in them. We use them as much and as often as we possibly can. Just like Julie said, we start our day every day with a circle in every class. So pre-K up through 5th grade, we've got about 310 students roughly. And every morning we have 25 minutes set aside that's in our schedule where students have a topic to discuss every day, and they take turns speaking, and they are learning to be good listeners of others and share concerns. Obviously one of the big goals of circles is to build that tight-knit community to where kids can share things in a space that's safe to them that might not be safe to someone else. So, and I'll just give you an example of how this has kind of come out for us. We had a young man last year in 5th grade who moved from a different school to our school, and within just a couple weeks of him being here and participating in circles in his classroom, he felt comfortable enough in the middle of a circle to say, hey, his teacher's name, this morning whenever I was getting up for school, there was a gun on the couch. He felt super uncomfortable with that, but the fact that he felt comfortable enough to say something, we were able to let our SRO officer know. She was able to get with the police officers to make sure that parents were taking proper precautions, but the teacher had created that environment through using morning meeting every day to where they felt like, okay, this is a safe place enough where I can share this with my friends, and I don't have to fear that they're going to make fun of me. So that's how we start our days every day. It's, again, 25 minutes of circle time. We call it morning meeting. We also do staff circles. So every time we have a faculty meeting, we sit in a circle. We don't sit in tables or in rows or anything like that. We all sit in a circle. And we always end our meetings with some type of positive reflection on the jobs that we do or the lives that we lead. Sometimes I can sense the tension in the room, so we try to go somewhere light and make it, fun to leave with, because ultimately, just like, our teachers need to build a relationship with their kids, I've got to build relationships with my teachers. And so we've got to have that tight-knit community to where they can come to me with concerns. And so we do that through staff circles. It also has on the side grade level circles. So that's something that we've just done on an as-needed basis to where, at school I have, say, a third grade group that they're really struggling with something specific. Maybe it's an issue on the playground or whatever. So myself and our school counselor, we'll grab all the third graders, we'll go to the gym, we'll sit in a big, huge circle, and we'll just kind of hash it out. Here are my expectations for you. What are you guys seeing that you think could be, could help solve this situation? And so we try to help kids be proactive in solving their own issues rather than us always solving them for them. Also on there we have parent circles and restorative circles. So parent circles, obviously this year is going to look very different, being that we're dealing with the pandemic. So we won't be able to have parents necessarily in the school in the circle. But last year and the year prior, we had a couple days where it was called Bring Your Dad to School or Bring Your Mom to School. And so we would have the first hour of the day where kids could bring their parent with them to see just a glimpse of their day. Because, especially for dads, I'm lucky enough that I'm a dad and I have two kids that go to school here. And so I know what's going on. 9 times out of 10, a lot of fathers don't necessarily know what goes on in the school day of their children. So I think it was a really effective way because we had so many dads that were saying, "Wow, I didn't know they did that in school." So I think that was really effective. And at the end of it, we actually had a circle where we had dads all sit in a circle. We had a topic point. Of course, you can imagine a bunch of dads in a room together. They're all, crickets. Didn't really want to talk, but it was interesting to hear the things that they were impressed with and the things that they were, I guess, not necessarily concerned with, but just genuinely appreciative of the fact of things that we do at our school. So, and then last, I have restorative circles on there. That's something that I've started using. And again, I know Julie mentioned restorative practices, and that's something that I've started using in the past year. And I found that is really, really effective in dealing with issues between a small group of students. Rather than a whole large group, it's something very intimate and specific to a group of kids rather than looking at a whole group. Okay, so this is a glimpse of what our morning meeting looks like. Obviously, this was last year. This is not this year in our current conditions, but this was what our morning meeting looks like. So this is a first grade classroom, and if you see the two little boys on the front there, the one in the red who's turned to the little boy in the sweatshirt, they have a morning greeting. So little boy in the red will turn to Jackson and say, "Hey, Jackson, I'm glad to see you." And then Jackson will look at Jason and say, "Hey, Jason, I'm glad to see you here today as well." So it's just a positive way of starting their day. And then they go into their topic. This is what a third grade looks like. So obviously first grade was sitting on a carpet, big group there. And then we've got third graders who are just sitting on tables. It's very informal, but it gets kids talking. That's what we want. We had this is our kindergarten meeting as well. Had one of our fabulous teachers that is part of our trauma-informed team that was part of the initial trauma-informed training. She went through all of our topics that we had and created a slideshow of every day. So you can see, I'm not sure if you can see the date on there, but there's a date on here, and it has the topic for the day. So the topic for that day is what's one thing you can do to make a substitute teacher feel welcome in our class. And so that's something that is real to these kids, and they need to know, hey, what are the expectations of me in regard to my substitute teacher in the event that my teacher's not here. And then in addition to our morning meeting topic, we also teach Ron Clark's Essential 55. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that. If you're in a school setting, man, I would strongly encourage you to look through that. It is 55 essential habits for kids to be successful adults. And you look at these, and many of you probably say, well, I teach my kids that. And that's probably true. but so many of our kids that are in our school, they don't get taught these things. So, for instance, the first rule there, Rule 5, if you win, don't brag. If you lose, don't show anger. And so that goes kind of back to Julie's point earlier about the rebellion. You know, these kids, first of all, need a relationship, and they need to know what to do with their emotions. So we're teaching them this is the appropriate way to respond in the event that you do win or in the event that you do lose. And we do this for the first couple weeks of school. So we teach all the 55 rules over the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then we come back and revisit those throughout the year as needed. But, you know, many of them are, when you're asked a question, you need to respond with a question. When you're speaking to an adult, you need to say yes, ma'am, or no, ma'am, or yes, sir, or no, sir. So just some things that many of us teach our kids that a lot of our kids don't necessarily get. So we want to make sure that they get that here at school. And then this is just a glimpse of what our Friday reflection looks like. And it's this way every week. So our Friday reflection is always share an area of strength this week or an area you need to grow in, and then set a goal for the following week. And so I'll tell a really, really cool story. We have she's in 2nd grade now, but when she was in kindergarten, had a little girl that had Down syndrome, and her goal for the week was to write her name. And that was a big, huge, lofty goal for her because she obviously has some occupational therapy needs as well. So the following week, all the kids were encouraging her to, helping her write her name, working through, specific processes of how to write her name. And then after a couple weeks of her working on it, she finally was able to write her name. And you can imagine just the excitement in the room because all these kids have, we've got a close-knit family now, and they know what each other's goals are, and they know specifically what hers is. And when she reached it, it was just excitement in the room. And so that kind of, to me, puts all this in a nutshell. We're doing circles to where it's part of our schedule. It's not a negotiable thing. It's expected every day that there's a circle to start the day. And then that is creating these relationships within classrooms to where basically you're creating a family. And I know that's one of my huge goals is that we create a family inside this building. So, and then I'm not sure if I went over on time there, but I'll try to answer the question there from Taylor. And then I'm going to turn it over to Job Isles at this time.
All right, thanks, Adam. Adam and I worked together whenever we first started out in education, and so it's always good to see him and hear about the things he's been doing and working on. While Serena gets me set up as presenter, maybe I am. It looks like. Yep, looks like I am. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint there. And I believe you should be able to see my slides. Okay, Serena's giving me a head nod, so I'm going to move on forward. So my name is Joe Isles, and I work in Knox County Schools. I'm the trauma-informed specialist there, which is simply a big title that means I support the schools and faculty and staff in supporting our students, right? So what I'm going to talk about is share with you just some of the logistics, struggles, and aspirations of trying to train and support 7,900 staff and 60,000 kids. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty big undertaking. We started with building strong brains as our foundation. So we a few years ago, I was in the first cohort. Pat Connor gave me the opportunity of being in the first cohort to train throughout the state in building strong brains. And so I started out there. And so when I got this position with Knox County, we kind of started with that as our foundation, right? Looking at the brain science, the triune brain, the typically developing child, the hierarchy, all of those things. Moving into shifting our lens, right, from asking the question, what is wrong with you, to I wonder what happened. And then we added on, how can I help right now? So not ending with, I wonder what happened. And then also keeping in mind that behavior iceberg, that every behavior has an underneath to it or a backstory to it. And then the good news of resilience and neuroplasticity, right? We can't leave teachers or any of our educators, our parents, at this place of just the bad news that the way we're raised and our experiences impact our brain physically. But we got to give them that good news of, hey, neuroplasticity is real, and we can help build resilience in our young people. And then we never, ever, ever, in every one of the trainings that I conduct, I always talk about self-care. And this year, more than ever, I would say, we have to be encouraging one another to implement self-care practices as we go through our day and through our weeks, because you can't give away what you don't have. And if we're just continually pouring out to kids, and we aren't rejuvenating ourselves, we're going to burn out. So we took that as our foundation, and we looked at what we were dealing with here, and we set ourselves a goal that by the end of the school year we're in now, by the end of 2020, 2021, we would have all 88 schools trained in trauma-informed practices. So then we looked at our district, and we have rural schools, we have urban schools, low income, we have some culturally diverse schools, suburban, high income schools. And I started in February, and that was kind of my response to that lofty goal, right? Okay, 88 schools, here we go, let's make this happen. And it's one thing to train a group of schools when they're all the same. That'd be lofty enough. But when we look at how different our schools can be, right? From one of our schools is surrounded by cow fields. Another one of our schools is about 5 minutes away from downtown Knoxville. So that's very different, right? The demographics of those students. But what's not different is the fact that trauma impacts the brain. So what we wanted to do, though, is we wanted to allow each school to express what their needs were. So we took that Building Strong Brains training as a foundation, and we did a little bit of a customizing to it. So first, I created a Google Drive folder, and I just called it Impacts of Trauma. We realized we had to get our admin and our leadership, our district leadership, and also our school leaders on board with this idea of why we even need our schools to be trauma-informed. If you look at the research on implementing trauma-informed practices in the school, University of North Carolina has this department called Implementation Science. It's a very boring article to read, honestly, but they did a lot of research on what's the best way to implement trauma-informed practices. And one of the biggest takeaways from that research was that it all comes down to the school leadership. If the school leadership has bought in and they're with it and they're championing that flag, then it's going to go a lot smoother. So we created this Google Drive folder with just a bunch of resources, a lot of research of why is this even important. That way we get our school leaders on board. From there, we created two different documents. I made a guidance document for us. And so we kind of built on to what the State Department had already created. So the State Department created a guidance document for trauma-informed discipline practices. Whenever the law came out last May about requiring school districts to come up with a trauma-informed discipline policy, they also created a guidance document. And understandably so, because the state of Tennessee is so diverse and there's so many different school systems, that guide had to be more of a general document, right? It had to be more of a very kind of a starting out type place. So we wanted to take it to the next step. So we created a guidance document of what does this look like, right? Very practically speaking, for trauma-informed discipline practices in a school, what can that look like? So we created that document. We also created what we called a trauma-informed school support tool. That comes into play after the initial Building Strong Brains training. After school goes through that, our plan was we're going to go into the school and use this school support tool to kind of look at what are we already doing well in that school, and then what are our areas that we can improve in. Based on that, we would then have follow-up trainings, follow-up professional development, follow-up resources we would send to teachers, send to the leadership, have ongoing meetings looking at how are we doing, continually monitoring the areas in which we need to grow in each of our schools. The thing is, you've probably heard the quote that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So back in about March, we got punched in the mouth, right? I mean, I was so excited about the guidance documents I came up with and the school support tool, and we were going to do the training and then do follow-up trainings, and man, we were just going to set the standard, right? And then COVID, and so we had to shut down schools, right? We couldn't do schools. Well, if we're not in schools, it's hard to implement that school support tool and find out where we can support schools. Not only that, but we are dealing with how are we even going to address these virtual challenges? Just in general, how do we connect with students virtually, right? When all we see is a face across the screen, that changes everything, right? It takes away body language. It takes away a lot of the little things that teachers do and administrators do every day that creates a connection between them and the student. And then, of course, because of everything going on, self-care became paramount for the success of any of the work we're doing. So that caused us to really shift our focus not away from trauma-informed practices, but onto the methods in which we're going to use to implement trauma-informed practices. So we're having to take all of the stuff we created and ask ourselves, what is this going to look like virtually? I was sharing with some of the other panelists before we got started here. We have about 60,000 kids, and about a third of those students have signed up for our virtual option this school year. So that right there changes the way you're going to run your classroom. That changes the way you're going to run a school, and it changes the way that I'm having to think about how are we going to train our schools to be trauma-informed and to implement these trauma-informed practices. However, what it hasn't changed is the why, right? It hasn't changed the process we're going to go through. You see, our why is still looking at that equality versus equity. It's still asking ourselves, what does this student need from me right now? And whether they're on the other side of a computer screen or they're sitting in front of me in person in a classroom, the why is still because we care about kids, you know, because these kids come to us and their parents are sending the best they have. I remember a principal one time saying, they're not keeping the good ones at home, right? They're sending us the best they've got. And when they get to us, we just have to say, you know, I don't know what happened. I kind of wonder what happened, but regardless, what do you need from me right now? And that's where the equity comes in. Am I going to be willing to support the students based on what they need right now? And utilizing that same process. So we're still doing the initial trauma-informed training with schools. We're doing it virtually now. So in the last week, I've done about 10 of those trainings with our schools. And it can be tough doing it virtually because I'm big on kind of feeding off of the participants and seeing where they're at and using audience feedback. And so it's tough virtually, but we're trying to implement some virtual strategies to do that. And then we're still going to have follow-up trainings. It's just going to be on different topics, right? It's going to be based on them telling us, hey, we think we need help on self-regulation, for example, or whatever they need, going back in and supporting them where they're at. Finally, one of the things we try to always make sure we do is we try to take care of the whole child. So not just through trauma-informed practices, but through a multi-tiered system of support approach, through a tiered approach. We have proactive, strategic, and intensive. And then we have all of these different categories there. Obviously, we have trauma-informed, but we also look at cultural responsiveness, PBIS, SEL, and restorative practices. They've already talked a lot about that, but that's kind of the what that we do, right? The trauma-informed is kind of the big lens through which we see all these other things. And then each of those are categories within the way in which we specifically implement trauma-informed practices. So that's a very brief, 20,000-foot overview of what we're doing in Knox County. But I think it gives you an idea of how we're trying to attack this issue and make sure that we're supporting all students regardless of their experiences. So at this point, I believe I'm passing it back to Janet.
All right. Excellent.
Sharing here.
Can you guys hear me? Super, super. Well, I don't know about everyone in the audience, but I'm super impressed. I love the passion from each of these panelists, and they are so dedicated to this work. It is very obvious, and their focus on relationships, because we know that's the key. So I want to ask you guys, we have time for maybe a couple of questions that I want to ask, and then we'll see if we have any questions in the chat box. The first thing I want you to think about for my panelists is, as you reflect on your trauma-informed work, what were some successes that really allowed this work to grow? And you can just jump in, any of you that would like.
I'll go ahead and start answering that one. One of the things that really helped us get the ball rolling was Knox County was, I thought it was wonderful. They created a Department of School Culture, first of all. And then within that department, they were able to create funding for my position, trauma-informed specialist. And by allowing me to be dedicated specifically to that focus, trauma-informed discipline and trauma-informed practices, it then allows the school leaders to focus on what they're doing and pull in the resources that I can provide for them. So that was a huge win for us.
I think a big success for us, Janet, was just the fact that there was a desire in the building for something more. And we were, it had been my third or fourth year as principal, and I was just really looking for something else. Like, we had tried curriculum, and we tried this, and we tried that, and there was something missing, and we weren't sure what it was. And so I got a group of individuals together, and we, obviously were able to go through the initial trauma-informed training. And we were it's almost like we all looked at each other and like, this is what we needed. So I think just the fact that we were all on the same page and we're looking for something, we just didn't know what the something was. But when we went to the initial trauma-informed training, I feel like we realized, okay, this is what we're missing at North Coffee. So I think a success was that we already had that desire for something better. And then we were able to find it through some of these trauma-informed practices.
Hey, Janet. I kind of second that with Adam. There were some times, we all were doing bits and pieces of things, but it never really had a name. And then just knowing that we had that guidance and specific additional strategies, and just knowing what it actually was to have that framework that many of us were utilizing, and then just seeing the successes that we had with that. We have kids that don't really want to go back to a traditional school because they don't see those strategies. They don't have that safety net there because we haven't expanded it district-wide, but, that they want to stay in their safe place, and so I'm hoping that we can grow our school into a community school rather than just an alternative school, where kids actually have a choice to come and stay and work with us with the trauma that they've experienced.
All right, thank you all for that. I think we have time for maybe one more quick question, and it's, if you were going to give advice to new districts or leaders about starting this journey to become trauma-informed, what would you say to them if you had to give them advice? And you can just jump in.
I'll respond. So I would think just from I guess the response would be different at different levels. So I'd start at the top. So from the top down, I think there has to be this sense of it's okay to focus on whole child ideas. Okay. So, and I think and I appreciate our current commissioner and her focus on the whole child. I think prior to her, we had discussions about whole child and social emotional health and well-being, but it was like we never had permission to do that. So I think from leadership, as far as, district office, I think they have to be okay with you taking time to do social emotional education, because I know, some of our supervisors are instruction, but if you aren't doing this, it doesn't matter what you're doing in front of the classroom. They're not listening to you. So you've got to develop those relationships and be trauma sensitive in order to be able to meet them academically. And so I think my advice would be to give teachers, to give principals, to give leaders that freedom to be able to make those decisions for their school if it benefits them in their specific situation.
Yeah, and I agree with Adam on that of getting the leadership involved. I would say two things with kind of getting the ball rolling with trauma-informed practices. First of all, do it in small bites, right? If it comes out of, hey, we're doing restorative practices now, and we're going to do trauma-informed, and make sure you respond versus react. Don't forget about the brain science. Teachers are just going to go like, whoa, I just teach math, right? But if we can bring it to them in small bites and say, here's one action step for you, then that can help out. And then also, as you're doing that, you've got to get your school leaders and district leadership on board with it. If it, like Adam said, if it's not coming down from above of this is what we're going to focus on and this is what our foundation is, then our teachers, understandably so, aren't going to feel safe to implement that and to pause time out of instruction in order to address those needs.
One thing that I would add to that is I definitely second that small bites. I set small goals, but then celebrating positives. And by celebrating the positives that you see, you're not only getting the top district admin involved and getting their support, but you're getting other schools. I mean, I can't even imagine what having 60,000 kids in 88 schools. I don't even want to think about what that looks like. But knowing that the ripple effect of positivity and celebrations from one school to another. Teachers talk via social media or whatever. They want to say, I want to know what's going on at Old Coffee, or I want to know what's going on at 4 o'clock. These are the hardest kids I've ever dealt with, and I had them in elementary school. I can't imagine what they're like in high school. How are they getting this kid to graduate? What are they doing? You know, and I just feel like celebrating the positives and involving your community and letting them know what you're doing. You know, we have several trauma-informed presentations at local churches just to let the churches know that what we're doing, what's different, and gaining their support so that when they're talking to our board members and they're talking to the superintendent, they know that terminology. And so I would suggest that as well.
Great. So I'm hearing, you know, getting your leadership involved and your community involved and parents involved, which was one of the questions, some strategies to engage parents from our audience. They are asking, what are some strategies to engage parents? And I know, Julie, you talked a little bit about that. Well, all three of you did. So, Adam, tell us a little bit more about your parent groups. That's incredible. Your dad's group or your circles group for parents?
Yeah, so that obviously was pre-COVID. So we're still going to be figuring that out. But the model that we had followed was essentially, like I said, it was I'll talk about dads primarily, but the Bring Your Dad to School Day. What we basically did was we separated it in pre-K2 and then 3-5, just so that we wouldn't have, you know, we didn't know how many people would show up, and we probably had, I would say, 200. Sorry about that. Let's call me. We probably had 200 dads, uncles, grandfathers in the building on our first Bring Your Dad to School Day. And so there were, they had about an hour. And so, for instance, so my son was in first grade whenever it was going on. So I went to his first grade classroom. So I got to put my dad hat on for a little while. And so his teacher, you know, she went through just normal routine. We started off the day with phonics instruction. She had a little glimpse of what that would look like. She went through and let the kids, you know, teach us, this is how we do our circle time or our centers. So we got to get a glimpse of just what their day looks like. For 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, our students are departmentalized in 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So they were able to actually go through a rotation. So they would go from the ELA teacher. They would stay in there for 15, 20 minutes. And they would have just a brief activity. They would gather their things and they would move to math class. They would have a brief activity, and it was just a good way for dads to get a glimpse of what was going on. And then, like I said, at the very end, my school counselor and myself had the dads in the gym in a big circle, and just kind of had them reflect on what they saw that they were just impressed with, and then maybe even some questions that they had. So it was just a good opportunity to get dads in the building. And I've always said, if my first interaction with a parent is positive, then if the next one needs to be negative, it'll go a lot smoother. Mm-hmm. So I think the more you can do that up front, the better you're off.
Great. All right. Well, I think we are about out of time. I need to turn it back over to Serena for any other pieces that we need to finish up with. So, Serena, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Janet, and thanks everyone on the panel. And I think we do have some time for questions. If I will throw some of these questions at you all, and you can jump in like you did with Janet. Kelly asked about the Google Drive that Mr. Isles has in Knox County. She asked, are they available to be used as a basis for creating similar docs in other districts or counties?
Yeah, so I'll have to check on that. That's above my pay grade to necessarily release that or not. I don't know for sure either way, to be honest. But I'm happy to check that out. So if anyone's interested in that, send me an email and I'll let you know what I can find out. It's the whole intellectual property aspect of it.
Gotcha. Great. Kelly also asks, will you be able to share any documents about how to set up or establish building trauma-informed school plans?
I'm not sure if that was for me or not, but I'll go ahead and answer just in case.
Yeah.
There's a really tremendous book that Massachusetts put out, Massachusetts Advocates for Children. They put out a book called Helping Traumatized Children Learn, and they had 2 volumes of that, and it's actually free online. You can get you can buy one. You can also just do a free PDF online if you do an internet search for it, and it just lays it out step by step how to implement it into a school, things to consider, pitfalls to look out for. So that was a tremendous resource in me as I was building some of the resources.
And I would also add to that, if a school is really wanting to go down this journey, you know, a good way to start is to get their mindset in the right mindset. And that might even be, like Julie mentioned, some of the book studies they've done. If it's an elementary school, middle, or high, really Help for Billy's a good one to start with by Heather Forbes. And you're going to get this PowerPoint, and there were others listed as well. So really getting the focus in that mindset of what is trauma-informed and what are ACEs, what do we need to look at, and how do we start this journey? And I would suggest that book study. Do you guys have any other ideas? I think that's one of the things we always suggest.
Fantastic. And I did like a super quick search, and I found a free copy of the book that Mr. Isles referenced. We had a couple of questions, and I think, Janet, you addressed it, but maybe a little more conversation around engaging parents, and are the trauma-informed care trainings available to parents to help them understand about ACEs and brain development and those types of things?
Well, I will say, you know, TCCY has done a tremendous amount of training in the community to really build that foundation, and they actually built that foundation for all of us to start this journey. So I think that for parents, that TCCY is an incredible resource to start with.
The Sullivan County Anti-Drug Coalition, actually, they're one of our community partners, and Melanie will come into our school and work with some of our kids. But one evening we had a parent engagement night, and they presented some of the strategies and talked about ACEs and just spent some time discussing these with some of our parents so they would know the terminology that we're using with their kids, and kind of just teaching them about different aspects of the brain as well.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Andrea asked about TCCY, and I'll put their website in there. They're the Tennessee Commission for Children and Youth, and they offer an excellent training called Building Strong Brains. I'm a trainer. It's fantastic. It's wonderful for all levels of learners. But I'll put their website in the chat box. Also, Trish asked a question about how do these techniques work in terms of like circles, et cetera, in high schools?
So I definitely don't know the answer because I'm not a high school principal, but I do know that our ninth grade academy in Coffee County, they have implemented circles at their school, and I think they do it. It's not a daily basis, but it's a weekly basis. And so I think they have kind of restructured their schedule to where on Fridays they have, you know, a 30, 45-minute time frame to where they use that for circle conversations. And they've actually, I think, for fear of losing time in the academic day, they have added an academic aspect to it as well to kind of cover all their bases. But yeah, the Coffee County Raider Academy, I know, is doing that. And again, it's not a daily circle, but it is weekly. So
our high school is not fully implemented in our high school, but during advisory time or during their homeroom time, they do use that to spend some time in circles and getting to know kids. And sometimes they'll actually leave the classroom and go out into the hallway, and it's in a pod. That's where we have a lot of our circles, and they use it for academic, kind of like a Socratic seminar type thing as well. That our middle schools have really implemented that pretty strongly and use the same advisory time to start listening to kids and talking with them. And it has reduced discipline in one of our middle schools probably by 30%.
I was an assistant principal at a high school in Knox County just last year. So I was at Fulton High School as an assistant principal there. And we use restorative practice. Like, that's just kind of the way that we do business there. Is if something's going down, the first thing we do is have a restorative conference. And if there's multiple students, we're going to do a restorative circle. And we'll bring parents in for restorative conferences or restorative circles, even with the teachers and between students. And so, I mean, that's just kind of the way we do business. And I'll tell you, it works. I mean, these kids, they when they first come in, the first time they're engaged with that, some of the freshmen are kind of resistant to it if they've never seen it before. But once they realize this is just what we're going to do, this is how we're going to operate, then they engage in it. And they realize, oh, I get to have a voice. And then they listen while the teacher has the voice. And then having a third person who's that neutral party to kind of bring everything together. I mean, it's really incredible how many problems can be solved through that process. And then with circles, the classroom's teachers kind of take it on themselves to use circles either on an as-needed basis if there's something that comes up, or to build community building circles. Usually they'll do that once a week or so and just kind of have more of a fun topic, bounce the ball for a talking piece, things like that.
Thank you for that. And I just want to close with, as I listen to the passion from these panelists and listen to what they're saying, what Job said is actually very true, that trauma-informed practices, it's not a program. It's not something we put up on the shelf. It's literally a way of doing business every single day, every single minute. So I appreciate this so much. I appreciate them taking the time as they're trying to start school in a really unprecedented time. But we appreciate your knowledge and your sharing that with us. And I will turn it back over to Serena.
Thank you so much, Janet. Thanks, everyone. I think some people were reflecting on that, Taylor. It's the way we do business. It's a great way to frame it. Connie says, people who say they don't have time to do it, it's, you don't have time not to do it. Some people were asking about data about trauma-informed schools, and I know I have seen some data around disciplinary actions and those types of things. Janet or anyone, do you know where some data may be for our folks?
We have our Department of Ed is currently working on putting that data together, so we know, where we know that with doing this work, that discipline issues go down. We know that chronic absenteeism goes down. So we're trying to put that data together, and I think our panelists probably have that data as well.
Great. So keep looking out for that. And in respect to everyone's time and our panelists' time, again, I know you're all educators, so this is one of the most interesting years ever. So we will let you go. I'm going to do a shameless plug. I'm a trainer of Building Strong Brains at Department of Children's Services. We offer free online webinars of Building Strong Brains. If you ever want to send anyone, a parent, a teacher, anyone, you can check out that website and attend that training for free, just FYI. And other people are saying this has been amazing. Thank you, Adam, Janet, Julie, Job, so much for giving us your time and your expertise. We truly appreciate you being a leader in this movement, and all of you here for being leaders in this movement. It really does further education goals for all of us. Thank you so much for our host, Jen Drake-Croft and Christina Casterling, and for Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth for putting this webinar together. We appreciate everyone here. Lots of great feedback. Connie, keep up the good work. Great training. Thank you so much. We will be sending out the PowerPoints tomorrow, and I will also gather up the resources that we brought together today that you all mentioned. These are phenomenal. I love the Ron Clark book and the other trauma-informed learning resources. So I'll compile that and send it tomorrow in an email to everyone. So again, it's 2:02. I really appreciate you all, and we will conclude our webinar today. So stay on the lookout tomorrow for an email, and please give us some feedback in the evaluation. I'm also going to add, if you have some time now, I'm going to add the evaluation there. Here. There we go. So if you're still here and can give us some feedback, there's the link for the evaluation. And everyone have a great day. Have a great school year. We need trauma-informed practice more than ever. So thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
See you guys.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Serena.
Thank you, Jen.